On this episode of the podcast, Brian Kelly returns to talk about his podcast that he started a year ago in December of 2018. And it's not so much talking about podcasting as it is the art of committing to something, seeing it through for a year, seeing where you are, and if you'd stop or continue. I absolutely love Brian as a human being. This was a lot of fun. If you don't know him, he is a photographer, he's a videographer, he's a director, he's a father, and of course, podcaster. You can find him at Brian Kelly Studios if you want photography and those sorts of things, or you can find the podcast at fullexposurepodcast.com. Now, I hope you enjoy this episode of the podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Are we going?
We're always going.
Oh my God.
We're always going.
I'm good.
You are good? I mean, there is no better place for me to start in 2020 in a new decade than with you. So.
Well, you're way too generous.
No,
two.
I mean, you've been on this process for a year, and I really wanted to start this year by talking to you about the evolution of the podcast. Right? You started it last, a year ago, December.
Partially your fault.
Partially my
your
fault.
fault. Yeah.
But I've been the process has been fascinating to me. How's it been going?
It's been beyond my wildest expectation. I didn't really have any expectations, so I set the bar low for myself.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
but that, I mean, for people who don't know you, that's literally your gear, right? Like
setting low expectations.
Like you set the bar on the floor and then leap over it by 88 feet. Like that's sort of how you operate.
Maybe this was born out of just an approach. I mean, I'm busy as a video director and a photographer, and I have those two sides of my business, and it occupies all my time. And
sure.
Then to start a podcast for me was like something I really had to think about before I did it, because I didn't want to start. I think there's some statistics that most podcasts go 6 episodes,
6 or 7, yeah,
and then they die. So, partly I had started thinking about a podcast just to reset it. I don't even know, probably a year and a half ago now, thought about it, and I thought, I'm a dumb creative. I get excited about things. They run out of gas. Ideas turn out to be not so good. So I set aside the impulse to start right away and give it some more time. And I thought, if I have that voice still nagging at me in a year, I'll do it. And then I'll commit to a year of running hard at it.
Wait, so this thing is like a 2-year?
Well, now if you add on, I'm coming up in March, it'll be a year.
A year of you kind of incubating?
But I had a year of thinking about it, and towards about 6 months into that year, 6 or 9 months into that year of thinking about it, you and I sat down and did your podcast.
Sure, yeah.
And then out of that experience, I started to formulate thinking about, I'm going to do this, how am I going to do it, and when will I start to launch? So I think 2 or 3 months after our conversation, I launched the first episode.
And so we're at 16? How many episodes?
24 or 5.
24 or 5. Gotcha.
Yeah, thanks
nice.
for listening.
I listen. I just don't keep count.
Just kidding.
Because thank God you're not one of those guys who on episode 83 of the...
No.
But what was interesting is your last episode with Carter, what I found fascinating is just the evolution of all of the ancillary media around it, right? In that one, there's drone footage. There's, what has that sort of evolution been like for you? Because typically, most podcasters approach this from an audio-only perspective, or they're doing sort of the basics of what I'm doing. Just throw a camera on, record some stuff, chop it up, and do whatever. But you have taken that to next level, given your aesthetic,
it's my background, right?
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
and also the premise of my podcast is rooted out of what I've done for 22 years, which is create portraits of people. So for people who don't know, the premise of my podcast on Full Exposure with Brian Kelly is I invite somebody to create a portrait in my studio or on location, someplace important to that person. And in Carter's case, it was out in Malibu, California. But point is, I want to start the episode with me creating a portrait of somebody. That's what I love to do. It's my profession.
Sure.
It's how I live and breathe and see the world, is through portraits. And then once that portrait session is done, we sit down and talk for about an hour about whatever we want. And the reason I started it, the premise is because I would always use conversation to diffuse people and to get them to relax, and then the photo shoot would end that we were on, and the conversation ended.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we're like, see you later. So I had an authentic, I think, approach to the premise of I'm not gonna talk about gardening or things I don't know about.
Sure.
But it was an extension of something I do for a living. That is an intimate conversation between two people. The video side is also what I do. I have a production company. I direct videos. I shoot commercials. I do all kinds of things with video. So that was just like more of a selfish way of saying, okay, I have a great production studio. I get people a little behind the scenes of the conversation. But then accidentally or just through listening to experts like yourself or other people in social media, just having various content and different be able to serialize content outside of just depending on an audio only file, and people finding it and then listening to it all and having
All
some
of it.
impression.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So our footprint, our growth has been incredible in the video side of it, and those impressions to me are almost, well, they're not almost, they are way more important to me than who downloads the entire episode and listens to it all.
And so for people who would probably pause at this point and go, what the hell is it? Explain what you mean by that.
Well, what it means is that our audience reach is, I wouldn't even guess at the factor of how many times through video impressions. So people will approach me and say, I've been watching your podcast, or I saw that episode. So I know how they're listening and how they're seeing. They'll say, I saw you on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, whatever. So I know that they're consuming the content in shorter snippets, 2 to 10 minute video clips. And they might then download the whole episode, or they might not, or they just want to watch videos and get a sense of what that conversation was about. So for me, in terms of returning value, in terms of, is the podcast making any dent in the world? Am I just shouting into the, the abyss? It's been super encouraging because we have tens of thousands of people that have looked at, viewed videos. Certain videos have had 10 to 20,000 views just
that's
on
awesome.
those. So that's the approach, is that now when I talk about partnership with people, like Metro Health came on as a partner, those are the audience figures that are relevant, and a lot of their logo placements, and I don't want to get in the weeds of business, but the point is like returning something for their investment into partnering with me on a podcast is showing logos, having a voiceover and their presence in those videos, which gets way more views than direct audio downloads where you only can hear me do a 20-second ad read about Metro Health. So I don't know. That's the growth of it.
And so you just came off of a road trip, right? That was one of the evolutions in the first year, which in and of itself is pretty impressive, right? Because we are sitting at the desk of where you kind of your home studio version, and then there's a hey, we go to your place version. Yeah. And you were out shooting a commercial or a bunch of commercials when you were in California?
I only went out for the podcast.
Oh, I thought you had a gig too. No, you just went out for the podcast?
No gig. The gig was the podcast.
Nice.
So I had arranged for 5 different guests that some of them I had no connection to, some of them I had deep connections with. But I started to compile a list of people. If I went to LA, who would I ask? And so I asked a few more than that, but I got 5 to confirm pretty quickly, and we had 6 days to shoot everything, which just getting around LA and doing some things and getting up to Malibu.
Which was my next question, right? Is the thing about what you do, and then when you add 2 more elements to what you do, right? You have 1 shot to do this.
Right.
Yeah. You got 1 shot to record the podcast, 1 shot to get the videos, 1 shot to get the photos. What's your process like when you show up? Like, let's go to the Rob Bell episode, because I think it's sort of a humorous anecdote, right? Like, he essentially leaves you at his house to go pick up his daughter, right?
Yeah, right.
And what is going through your head at that point, knowing that when he walks in, you've got to go. There is no, hey man, how's it go? It's like we're sitting down and we're doing a show.
Yeah, and because of the partnership with some sponsorship dollars with Metro Health, I'm afforded some crew. I'm not doing everything DIY.
Sure.
I have Mark Andrus, who's my, he manages all the cameras, and I manage the audio because we're talking into the mics. We also had a lighting assistant that was LA based. So for Rob's, we'll just break it down. Rob's episode was we prearranged to meet. I think it was 2:00. We loaded into his house. We had I came in a rental van. The lighting guy came with a small truck of gear. And these are small productions, but compared to what we normally do.
They sound really small.
It's,
I'm totally.
It is LA, so everything we do is small there compared to. But so we do want a little bit of lighting. Again, I'm in video and photography and all this stuff, so I want it to have production value, even if we're on location. So met Rob, said hello, had a brief conversation, looked at his house, decided we were gonna just sit at his dining room table. And then we started setting up the lighting. In the meantime, he leaves to go pick up his daughter from school. And my thought is, like, what am I going to talk to this guy about? Rob was somebody I know who Rob is.
Sure.
I
right.
didn't go to his church, but I know the arc of his journey and who he is today and what he's been doing. But I had no personal connection. I knew his brother, and we had some mutual friends that sort of greased the wheels for him to even do the episode at his home. So just tried to set a vibe and just get a temperature check. That's always thing.
Yeah.
The first thing that happens is like, what kind of mood is this person in?
Yep.
Is it prickly or whatever? So he said, hey, I'm gonna run and do pick up my daughter from school. That's like non-negotiable. And so he took off, and we were setting up anyway. So it was great. Well, it's we'll be ready to go when you do that. So normally we do the portrait first. Rob's we did second. I made the choice. It was hot. It was in the afternoon. I'm a larger guy at the moment. I don't want to. And doing photography outdoors always, it's more stressful on me than it looks. I think probably. I'm thinking all the time about lighting and how I'm going to work with people outside. So I expend a bit of energy, and I didn't want to get sweaty. So for the indoor interview.
Sure. Yeah.
So we did the conversation first, and then and then ended up doing the portraits outside by his pool, and did a couple indoors, but I didn't like them very much, so we took the outside stuff for the edit. I did some prep work. I listened to more of his Robcast on the plane coming out, revisited some news stories about him, and then just fired into it. But while he was gone, he had a tree, one of those book trees or bookshelves.
Sure. Yeah.
It just had 50 books on it, and I just started. It wasn't snooping. It was right by the front door in the living room that we were setting
Right.
up in. So I just started going through his coffee table book collection, and then found some really interesting stuff. He loves the Beastie Boys. I love the Beastie Boys. He loves Ai Weiwei. He likes Banksy.
I use that one because that one seemed like, and we've been friends long enough so I can sort of stumble around this. That one seemed like it might have been a little cool at the beginning, right until you started talking about the books, and then you sort of opened him up,
Well, I think
and obviously because he
I
doesn't
jumped
know.
him with that right away.
Yeah.
And I think that set the tone, I think, for him to go, oh, this is a different kind of podcast conversation. I wasn't there. I told him up front when I met him before cameras rolled. I'm not here to play the broken evangelical, either you being broken or me being broken, and I need you to fix me, like that narrative. I'm not interested in that narrative.
Right.
So, and he laughed at that. He thought that was funny. And so, but then when I approached him about art and books and all these sort of these outsiders, these renegades that are on his book, they're in his book collection. He's a renegade. He's an outsider.
Sure.
now.
Yeah.
So I think that teed it up in a different way and sort of quickly reframed maybe what he thought he was getting into. If he gave it any thought, I have no idea. I also don't think he he's a different cat. So.
Well, and that's what I mean. Like
yeah.
before you get the seconds before you get into it, it sort of feels like he's not real sure what's going to happen
Yeah.
here, right? Like it's like, yeah, man, hey, how's it
Right.
going? And then after that, you sort of.
Well, you and I have talked about that experience too, just being podcasters. It takes, regardless who it is, I think the best content comes about halfway through towards the end.
Yeah, because what we talk about all the time is you've got to break people's veneer,
Yeah.
and that sounds violent and physical, but it's really not. When people show up, and you and I have been in enough formal situations, right? Hey, what's your name? Oh, Brian Kelly. What do you do? I'm a photographer. Oh, what would you have shot that I would know? Da-da, 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 da-da. But if they talk to you for 5 more minutes, they might learn something about you as opposed to what they could just get from your Wikipedia entry. You know?
And in a podcast format, you know, you cannot, if you're a guest, you cannot sustain a veneer. Eventually you're going to start, you know, really, you're going to relax. Your body language is going to relax. You're going to lean into it. You're going to be, you're going to forget that you're projecting and that you're cycling answers in your head before they come out of your mouth. Like all that is important to get rid of.
Do you think, because I have not done many in people's homes. I've done a couple in people's homes, but I've done a lot on location. Do you think that going to somebody's location loosens them up faster than when they come here?
I don't know yet. I think in my mind, I would say, yeah, I want to believe that. I don't know if it's true. I say that I think the curiosity from a selfish standpoint, there's 2 or 3 layers of curiosity about going to Rob Bell's home. One is, what's it look like? He's been on Oprah. He travels the world giving talks, and he's a best-selling author. What does it look like in LA? Is it a mansion? Is it not a mansion? Is it a normal house? You know, and those sort of questions I have sort of inform me indirectly, like how this person lives, how they perceive themselves. Like there's a lot of answers and clues and questions I have when you see somebody's home, and I've photographed, you know, through just the accident of what I do for a living. I've been in incredibly rich people's homes, documenting the home or doing portrait sessions or celebrity home or whatever it might be, or just normal. I shot a thing in Detroit yesterday that was a woman in Warren, Michigan, who got airlifted out of a cruise that she was on in Alaska, and I was illustrating something for a magazine. So all over the place. That's why I love the camera and photography, and we could talk about that for days. But the other thing is the curiosity. The audience has a curiosity who Rob Bell is. What does he look like? What is he really? What's his dining room look like? You know, it's all sort of like this sort of, you know, fly on the wall sort of. I'm a voyeur. I'm a photographer. I like to observe. I like to watch. I like to create my own conclusions. We probably are off base, but you know what I mean. You have some instinct about who people are. I forget where I ran out of gas on that, but there was another point in there maybe about how.
I was just asking, do you find they relax quicker? Because it seems like, and again, having listened to Carter's episode and then watched the videos, there's a disparity in because the visual adds something that you don't pick up in the audio, and it feels like at some point he gets a little bit more relaxed when he's outside.
Carter was super relaxed. We were at his home in Malibu on this canyon that has ocean views. It's beautiful. I also know Carter quite well. He's a friend. So we have a very easy, jokey relationship. So he was ready to settle in and just chat. He was excited about it. I think somebody at home, maybe Rob, you know, maybe he doesn't want you to see all your home, or his kids were there. I don't know. It's a double edge. I think it's, as I think about it, as we've talked through this question, I think it's a case by case basis. I think some people could really kick it off and be awesome, relaxed at home, and other people are add an extra veneer because you're in their home.
Because they're guarded. Yeah. What's surprised you about this part of the journey in the last year? Because it's something you've never done before, right? Outside of in an abstract sense, doing it without a microphone, right? You've done the interview part.
I think the closest thing to podcasting that I do professionally is be a video director. And I do a lot of mini documentaries, like we call them branded testimonials. These are real customers with a real experience, like Subaru or the crash survivors. We do stuff for Subaru. Interview them about their experience. So that sort of shepherding conversations, making people feel comfortable on camera, not just a photography camera, but with a video crew and talking to me. I try to be this soft little cushion pillow to express feelings. Some of them are, we do healthcare videos and things too. People have been through some shit in their life, they're going to talk about it. And so you have to have an empathetic view and toe the line between how much you can push somebody or not for a commercial purpose or a corporate purpose.
Right. Yes.
So what surprised me the most, just the response, I would say, has been really nice. And we've had some great growth. And when I say that we're not the biggest podcast, I'm saying for my benchmarks, which were low, and starting from episode 1 to 24, there's been a consistent growth in audience, in video views, in downloads, like all that stuff. And then Metro Health coming on board as a partner was a huge boost of confidence. They're one of the big 3 hospital systems in town.
Sure.
They care about the community. I care about the community. That's how they, and the big surprise was how they, the type of underwriting that we have is not a typical ad buy for them. It's more in their corporate social responsibility bucket. They want to support the arts, culture, cool things, innovative efforts. They fortunately view me as doing something kind of in that spectrum around conversation and creating art through conversation. So it just gets me really fired up about this year. I think I can set a goal of having another sponsor added on, but they have to be the right fit. I just don't want anybody, or like I've been approached on certain things, and it doesn't mean there's something inherently wrong, but it's like there's certain things people want from partnerships, and I want something from that partnership too. So
yes. And they might not be the same thing.
Yeah, and that's fine, and you find that through conversation and figuring out what's best. But that's been surprising. Also, just growth. I'm really working how hard I am on it. I'm spending. Listen, I've been in business a long time. I know how much work things take, and I did not underestimate how much work it is to do something at a level that I'll be satisfied with. It takes tremendous amount of time and energy, but I'm, double that on top of it. How much time? Because I'm enjoying it. Because of having a partnership with somebody, you want to execute at a high level. So it's a double-edged sword. It is, but I love it. And I'm learning, and I'm trying to do the conversations in a way that I personally can grow from each one of those contacts. I want to make better portraits at the beginning of the guest. I want to have a little better video production of that episode, and I want to have a better conversation. And I also know that I have a lot of work to do in terms of being an interviewer. And
so how has your questioning and your prep work gone in 25 episodes? How has that changed for you?
Well, I can tell you how it's bad.
No.
I can. Okay. But that's an honest answer.
Okay.
To it. It's bad that I will ramble and set up a question, almost spoon feeding what I might perceive to be one of 3 options for answers for them, and that comes from that's a bad habit, from a skill that I need as a video director
to get
as in a corporate ad
yeah.
setting or whatever. You want sound bites back from people,
right?
And I should do a better job of just teeing up the question and walking away from it, and then listen to your answer. So I have a tendency to sort of fill in these meandering sort of setup questions, because I edit the audio, I don't edit the video, but I edit the podcast audio that goes up myself. I hate myself every week. I do. I hate the question, But
so what are you doing to fix it?
I'm trying to tighten it up. Get to the essence of the question. So
but like, what does that mean for you, right? Like, how are you practicing that? Like, are you interviewing your family members?
No, it's just being present in the moment, knowing that that's a weak spot for me when I'm in a podcast environment, and being conscious, like I would be now if I was my next question. That little voice would be like, let's tighten this up. I don't need to over-explain. I have guests on for a reason. They're interesting people, and I need to let them be interesting. And I don't need to set up in a way how I want the answer to be interesting. So it's a fine line. I don't know. You've listened to a lot of the podcasts, but
I've listened to all of them, despite your judginess. I know I literally have listened to every single one of them.
But have you noticed that as just critical feedback to me? Like,
yeah.
Does it bug you? Sometimes you're like, Jesus, Brian, get to the question.
No. It doesn't bug me. I think, here's what I would say. I think interviewing people is difficult.
Yeah.
Because as a culture, our job has been to wait for our turn to talk.
Yeah.
As opposed to go, hey, how's your holidays?
Yeah.
And then just whatever comes out of your mouth, I'm going to let you do whatever.
Right.
That's not a natural gear in Western society. It's for me to go, how was your holidays? Because I have a story I'd rather tell than whatever the hell you're about to say, right? Yep. So does it bother me? No, it's the hardest part. It's why people look at Terry Gross and go, well, geez, she's a genius, right? because she has crafted that part of her personality to know how to ask a question and get out of the way.
Yeah.
And that's not how we talk.
No, it's not how you would normally have. I think that separates podcasts kind of from Terry Gross, although I listen to her podcast version of her show as well. But like, podcasts can have this sort of meandering. It's sort of what takes it away from being a show, a TV show, or because you can get kind of loose and squishy in setups and have some banter that you wouldn't have on Charlie Rose or, a bad example, but shows like that are just conversational on television or a late night show or whatever where you're trying to do bits. But
yeah, I guess I would yes, I agree with you because there's a time constraint there that we don't have, right? We can end this at 22 minutes, 46 minutes.
I have a hard stop, by the way. No,
I didn't ask you and I don't care. So,
I don't have a hard stop.
But what I meant about her is that she, even in that time constraint, she's built a time constraint where she knows how she can get to break that veneer down faster than most human beings because she has to,
right,
and B, because she's gotten to the art of listening.
Right, and she's more prepared than 95% of the people asking questions.
She's more prepared about your life than you are.
Exactly, and I think she's also really good at getting back to really hard questions in a way that seems soft. So if she follows up with something that is a point of stickiness with that guest or in their history, but she has to talk about it or ask the question, she does it in a way that is masterful and is rooted in knowledge. It isn't just like, tell me something, I have to ask you something salacious. It's in the context of learning.
Right.
Like, help me learn from your situation.
Isn't that a BuzzFeed article title?
Is it?
No, I mean, like, I need to get the salacious thing out so I can get all the clicks.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And
Brian Kelly says he hates himself.
Yeah, exactly. I do. Yeah, he says he's fat. It's true. I'm fat. That's all right. No, but that sort of process has been amazing in terms of it's hard to listen to yourself. I think I'm hypercritical in a good way in terms of wanting to use that criticism and filter it towards getting something I envision what the podcast might be a year or two from now in terms of, am I good at what I'm doing? Am I improving? I don't look at conversation as any different than creating a portrait. It's art, and there's a device. Each interviewer, I love Howard Stern. There's so many people I love that are, Dak Shepard's another one that I love a lot, just like has a way of disarming people, but it's through their own vulnerability that they get people to share their vulnerability. So these are things I'm thinking of. I'm not going to get there tomorrow on the next shoot or whatever, but I want it to, I'm not trying to model specifically, but I'm trying to take, like I do with photography, I'm inspired by certain photographs and photographers, emulating some parts of what inspires me as a photographer inspires me as a podcaster, because I admire how certain people ask questions, and I'm just trying to modulate and trying to fit for me that feels authentic.
And so we just came out of the holiday break. Did you get any time off? Do you ever take time off?
Yeah, I mean this
like
year
real time?
more than any year. Well, that's complicated. It's a complicated thing for a couple of reasons. I'll go into both of them. One is this year I took more time off, but I had a busy December, much busier than I thought. I had 2 projects come up in the middle of the month that I was gone for 9 or 10 days in the middle of the month, got back just before Christmas. Then my family on my side started to arrive. My parents came in, my brother came in from Boston. We had Selma Kathy's family in. But I just unplugged. I was toast. I was in Connecticut, and then I was in Arizona. Pretty intense project in Arizona. I was pretty burnt out and came back and just decided to unplug. So I did. Felt rested and ready to go. Thought a lot about what I wanted to do. It's like you, though. I think there's always a gear that's in work. Like for me, there's always some gear in my head that I'm thinking about something related to my business. I don't have a salary, a job, so
Sure.
I have to be as a freelancer. So if I ever take any time off, a little bit about my family dynamic, but my wife and I can never really get away together to do anything, and our kids are 20, 18, and 14, but just through some special needs that 2 of our kids have, we just can't make it work. And our youngest has needs that are intense. So for us to get away and truly unplug it, that just doesn't happen. We've been able to be happily married in that context and love our family and love our dynamic, even though it's non-traditional. It's a challenge to like unplug and get away, as a family, but also there's always a lot going on at home. It's not always a restful place.
So
sometimes I rest on the road.
Yeah. So is that how you recharge?
Well, sometimes. I mean, I do enjoy travel. It's kind of my way away from time, away to not be in the stress of some of our home care situation. I do not want to paint a picture of what's happening.
Yeah, no.
But it's just that it has rigors and demands that other home environments don't have. So travel is kind of a respite. I get to go and do and only focus on that particular job. I think it makes me effective in those situations, more effective than, I don't say more, but just effective in the way that I'm wholly enjoying just only focusing on this and not having, like I would at home, balance what time am I home to help out with faith or to, sort of give my wife a break and let her do something. I'm just don't have that constraint. So I love that, and I love to travel. I've always loved to travel, and but work is an escape. I'm lucky. I love what I do, and usually now I'm working on something really interesting and fun. Not all the time. I'll do lots of different types of jobs, but fortunately, I'm able to work on things that are fun, and the podcast now is one of those things that I'm like, I can't wait to get to, or what guest am I going to try to interview next, and balance it between what I do in my home studio versus taking it out on the road.
And so what does that look like in 2020? Like when's episode 26?
I have 3 in the can still. I still have 1 more from LA that I haven't released with a photographer friend of mine who's an amazing photographer and has an incredible career. And then I have 1 that I shot. There's 2. Hold on. Oh, I have 1 episode from Detroit that I shot. That's ready to go. That's probably the next one up. And then I have 1 I shot of an artist here, Rick Bierhorst in Grand Rapids. So I have 3 in the
right.
I have 3 in the
that
queue.
One was still out there. Yeah.
So, but work sort of disrupted my whole publishing schedule. I intended to get out another episode this month, or last month in December, yeah. And because of that work trip, it didn't, and then I decided to unplug and not try to get out a podcast in December and then come out swinging in 2020.
That's a good call, by the way.
Yeah, I don't regret it. Yeah, it was a good move. It was a good move to just like rest. I made a joke about, my whole vacation over Christmas was basically just finding ways to kill time between meals, and I'm paying the price for that. But God, it was great.
I've got a friend who says he's working on his before photo. So,
yeah, I would like. Yeah, I need to roll that back. But looking forward to 2020, I think the mix of location stuff and the tricky part I'm at right now, and maybe you have some insight to it, is I'd be interested if you had any. Was I don't want to lose, like, I don't want people to just think I'm doing episodes outside of Grand Rapids, which quickly becomes what people remember. It's like,
it's so fascinating to me, if I can cut you off for a second. Like, it's so fascinating to me. I think the last time we talked about this in December of 2018. Was it
December?
It was December 2018.
Yeah.
This world that you live in, this Grand Rapidian sort of part of Dante's Inferno that you live in is so fascinating to me, because like I don't look at content like that, because I don't run in that circle, right? Like I don't know that anyone ever goes, well, sure didn't do enough Grand Rapids stuff with your TikTok experiments that you're doing, Yeah. So it's interesting to me that you have to keep that in the back of your mind, which is so not surreal or strange. It's just it's your world is so different than me that I don't know that I have any insight to that because I don't have that politic.
Well, here's what it's born out of. It's born out of that a lot of people think if I'm, and this is just people I see, friends, business associates, or whatever, and they'll go, they remember when you're out of town. And so one impression people have of me is like, oh my gosh, you are on the road all the time. Like you travel so much. And it's like, I haven't been on a plane in 6 months, but they remembered that in 6 months ago, I might've been somewhere. Okay. But I posted a bunch of stuff from Grand Rapids in that time. It just doesn't
I had
register.
28 Pronto Pups. Why don't you shut up?
Yeah, exactly. I live for Culver's. All right. You probably saw me
I'm
at the
dipping Pronto Pups into the Culver's. Like I'm literally down the street.
It's, but that's a product of how impressions are made online. Like,
the perceptions by which people decide what you've done in your life versus what you actually did.
Exactly. So the thing, I've had people tell me, did you move? They'll see a bunch of episodes from LA. Did you move to LA? I thought you moved to LA. Like these are real things that happened to me. I thought you moved to LA. Are you still in town? It's like, I'm not going anywhere. I just happen to be able to leave occasionally, rarely, in the context of a year. Am I on the road? I'm in state on the road. I go to Detroit and various places, but that doesn't count as travel to me, really. I have to get on a plane.
I wonder, so has that escalated in the last 6 months since you went on this road trip, you did all these things in 5 days, but released them essentially over 4.5 months. Has that escalated that whole, I live in LA?
Well, that was my concern is I was trying to break it up. I did consciously, I think I did 2 episodes from LA. Then I released one with Emily Petersmark from the Crane's Wives, and I shot that and released it really quickly because it was here in my studio. And it's like I did 2 episodes from LA. I want to lob one in from Grand Rapids. So this rhythm of episodes, I'm probably way overthinking it. You know what I mean? But now it's like,
obviously not if people are still like, hey man, I hear you live in London now, and you're like, what? What?
Yeah, I don't know where people think I live. I just think, the takeaway is I live in Grand Rapids. I spend 95% of my time here, and 90 to 95% of my clients are in Grand Rapids, West Michigan. So I don't know.
The rant was better than the takeaway, just so you know.
Sorry. Well,
you're welcome.
I'm just ranting about.
No,
Pay
it's fine.
attention.
I am so fascinated by this
I don't know.
circle that you run in. That's like
what's my circle?
No, that if you post something from LA
sure.
that you now live in a bungalow, off of Sunset.
I don't know.
Sunset
It's like
Strip.
It always surprises me, and it's not just about the podcast. It's just like if I was. It's more like how much you travel, and I understand that it's memorable, and you'll think if you're on a trip like you and Angie went to South Carolina on a great trip, So it's like. Was that a year ago or was that 2 months ago in my mind's eye when I catch up with you? And you're like, and I say, oh my gosh, that trip you just took.
Yes.
You'd be like, no, that was 12, 15 months ago. What are you talking about?
It was in 2009.
Yeah. First gen Facebook.
Right. Yes. But, Gen 1 Facebook is when we took that trip.
But yeah, I don't know.
So
I'm looking forward. I mean, these are nice problems to have.
Totally.
It's not a rant. It's
so
just,
what do you brought up Emily. What is the music portion going to be a part of 2020, or was that sort of a brief experiment?
Well, if I happen to have a guest who can play acoustic guitar and sing as beautiful as Emily Petersmark or Brian Vander Ark, and they'll come to the studio and do a one-off video production from it, we'll do an in-studio session with musicians. I'm not going to do just a musician singing. It's going to be coupled with the same premise of the podcast, a portrait.
100%. I just didn't know if that was going to be part of 2020 or you're just sort of playing to see what happens.
I don't have a bucket of certain things. I'd like to do 5 musicians this year. I don't have it parceled out that. It's just when things come up. There's certain people I'd love to partner with the listening room somehow, and Quinn's efforts there, and see if there's some, there's ideas.
Sure.
There's musicians in town. Wouldn't be able to do many of them, but if some of them want to come in town and do a podcast, we could dump them in the studio for a couple hours and see what comes of it. I think it's a long shot. I don't think people traveling in want to spend that amount of time, but we'll see. Awesome. Grant Vander Ark told me that. He's like, no, I wouldn't want to do that if I was out of town. It's already enough. I'm traveling.
Tired.
Yeah. His masseuse comes at 3:30 pre-show. It's tough, It's squeezing in a podcast for the local guy. But who knows? What about you? What are you going to do for the Incredible Hult?
I don't know. I really don't know. This year feels sort of weird to me, even though we're just a couple days in. It feels like it's got a different energy, and I mean that in a good way, despite the top layer of the universe that's pretty shitty.
You're right.
The under part, like the down on the ground part, feels like it's got a different energy. So I don't know. I'm just kind of excited to see what happens.
Yeah.
And like
because you ramped it up. You were dormant for a little bit.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, there was spurty in 2019
Totally.
bit, and then you fired it up, and then you shifted to do more podcast content. Why was that part of your...
Because this is my favorite thing on earth to do, is to talk to people, and
Yeah.
I don't have an outlet to do that necessarily. Most of my outlet, as you know, is speaking at people,
Sure, yeah.
which is fun.
Which I love, yeah.
But
it's good.
I would love to do this more, so I'm just doing this because I like doing it.
Yeah.
I don't have any preconceived notions. I don't have any end goal in sight, other than if I've got people that are interesting like yourself that will sit down for 40 minutes and give me the time, I absolutely want to do
Has
it.
it been 40 already?
It has, yes. This is the worst ever. But so the ramp up was just, hey, much like you said, like, hey, I like doing this. Why am I not doing it more? Oh, I'm
Sure.
not doing it more because I'm not making it a priority.
Well, it does complement your other sort of media streams. I mean, you are doing the things that you have. I mean, you're teaching and informing people, and God knows you're keynoting enough all over the state. I
God
mean,
knows.
Keynote here, a keynote there.
Oddly enough, not much here, though. I have the inverse problem of you.
Well, you know Flint very well.
I do know Flint very well. 11 times a year, I know Flint very well.
But yeah, no, but I think it's a good compliment, and you never know where it'll go. That's the thing is, I've had opportunities that have fed my normal business streams.
Yeah, I would
because of
imagine.
the podcast.
I would imagine.
And I say that not because that was some grand plan. I had no grand plan for it. It's just more eyes on me releasing podcasts. It just puts you top of mind for certain things, and you're just reminded of something that you do well, and maybe they'll engage you and hire you to do it.
And I would imagine, because of the strategy to put things in LinkedIn, where LinkedIn is your content withstanding, LinkedIn is predominantly people yelling at you about the thing they want to sell you. And you're like, no, here's an interesting interview with an interesting person. Enjoy, right? Which I think opens you up for people to go, well, there's video in that. There's photos connected to that.
Sure.
He's a photographer. Maybe I should see if he wants to do this project I have.
Yeah, and that's a scenario that's happened a few times last year, and I'm sure will go forward. I think a lot of these social media people, be it Gary Vee or others, whatever you think of him or whatever, his ideas are very sound. I'm a fan of his. I really cut through like the personality of it I think he is insightful, but in terms of giving away, that jab. What is it?
3 jabs and 1 hook.
One hook, yeah. So just the point of like putting it out and sharing it, people will find their own relevancy to what you do.
Yeah.
And whether they just enjoy it because they're like, oh, there's a quick snippet of Rob Bell talking to somebody. Great.
But you've had such a great guest list in 2019 that I think it can't help but raise your, especially on LinkedIn, right? Because you've got all of these different looks. You've got all the stuff going on with Willie the Kid and Super Dre, and you've got content that connects to those people. So every single time that they drop a new vodka or celebrate a new restaurant opening, you've got content out in the ecosystem that connects you back to that universe.
Yeah, and that's, I've been fortunate to be in business a long enough time I do have deep connections in the West Michigan community. There's very few people I don't think that I could at least call and invite to be on the podcast I would be surprised if they didn't say yes, because it's a pretty safe space
Sure.
to come to.
Yes.
There's no gotchas, but at the same, so I have been able to get that or leverage a relationship like with somebody I have who's not Rob Bell, but they're Rob Bell's best friend, and they can make an intro. And I have no problem and not necessarily nervous about doing that. But in terms of like developing the guests, I think I just want to build, and it's a chicken or egg thing. I went through the same thing with photography and video. It's like you're not given high profile people to photograph until you've photographed high profile people. Like they're just not, if you don't have anybody that they recognize, they're not going to give you a recognizable person. Same thing with podcasting. You know, it's the same sort of thing. So, but the other thing, oddly, I'm struggling with is what is the podcast about? You know, I mean, am I just trying to talk to as high profile people as I can, or not? And I like the mix right now. I really like talking to just someone who I find incredibly interesting, who has a great story in whatever field that they're working in, and it's rooted in all this authenticity, is just as exciting as talking to Carter Osterhaus in Malibu.
Yeah, and I mean, I certainly don't feel like that's your podcast. I feel like, given what you do as an art form in photography, right? If we go back to the nexus of photography when people thought it was witchcraft and it stole their soul, right? Like a great photography tells a story, and then you're just extending that story in an audio form, right? Like you're telling a story visually.
I started
and then
to call the I forget what I wrote. It's on my on the Full Exposure podcast page, but it's like the conversation becomes another portrait, another version of a portrait of a person. So we create a literal portrait through photography, and then there's this other portrait of them that emerges through this collaborative conversation that we have. So I'm thinking about those things as I'm like booking people, and I'm trying to think of the conversation more as a artful conversation, another way to think about portraiture, because that just clicks in my brain.
Right.
It works for me, and other people might think that's weird to talk about a conversation as creating a portrait of somebody, but it just works for how my brain works. And so if I strip away like all these little insecure little voices I have, or doubts that I have about what am I doing, what's my next step, what does my podcast mean, it's like I'm only 24 or 5 episodes in, like, you know, pump the brakes. We can I got a couple years to figure this out, you know.
Did you I know you had a list when you started, and a couple of those people you actually ticked off in 2019. Do you are you an add to the list, or did you start a new list for 2020? Like, is
well, the list isn't timestamped, so it's a wish list.
So it's just an ongoing wish list.
Just an ongoing wish list. They're getting scratched off and added. And people, I had somebody, my wife suggested somebody today would be really great. And I thought, oh man, I'll see if I can do that. But I just thought, I can share it. I don't know if it'll come through, but like Bill Lewis, who owns Yesterdog. Yeah. He's an interesting character.
Totally.
You know? Amazing business. Everybody loves or hates Yesterdog. And I think he'd be an interesting guy. I don't know how conversation, I know him
sure, right.
I don't, know who he is. We're not friendly, but he'd be interesting. That kind of pillar iconic person in West Michigan is kind of cool.
In my head, I'm picturing your wish list as like one of those serial killer boards where it's just like your photo with like yarn connecting.
Yours is extra large on that bulletin board right
connecting
now.
to the.
It's had some darts at it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So, but yeah, I mean, I do have a big wish list, and some of them are what would seem improbable names to say yes, but I guarantee I'll get a couple of those this year.
Of course you will. Yeah.
And
how many episodes do you want to do in a year? Now that you've got a year under your belt, is 25 of a safe one?
Yeah, I'm contracted, at least for just for the sake of Metro. It's 25 episodes, so call it 2 a month.
Got it.
But I'd like to do more. I'm like you. If I could do more of this and less of running to Detroit and creating a portrait of a person who was airlifted off a cruise ship, that would be okay with me.
All right.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
I mean, not poo-pooing any type of
No.
work.
But
or person. But like, there's what you do and what you love to do. And I'm beginning to really think that I can get a couple more partnerships to even do more stuff than I'm doing now and do more locations.
What would that mean? More locations? What would you, if money wasn't an object and you could add a layer, what would that layer be?
Well, it would be a little different podcasting set, here in the studio, and it would be the ability to go almost anywhere in the world to do things, because I have a lot of side interests. I have a lot of. It's funny that they might have been 10 years ago a bucket list I had of portrait projects, global, like wherever. I want to go photograph these. There's these guys in Spain, in the Basque region of Spain, that make these stones that they lift, the big iron guys.
Got it.
It's
Yeah,
an
yeah.
ancient village, like, portraits of those people. I want to shoot in Portugal the huge wave riders at Nazaré in Portugal. I want to take portraits of the surfers that ride these monstrous 90-foot waves and almost die every time they're out in the water.
Yes.
And I also want to interview, and this gets to the podcast, I want to interview them, do portraits, but I've wanted this portrait project for years now. Also, the people that save them on the wave runners and stuff that haul them out and save their lives every time they get in the ocean. Just interesting stuff like that. Well, that's only kind of maybe interesting to me, but I think there's larger metaphors for life, for the podcast, and those types of things.
But I wonder if this form often, because I think about that a lot. I was when I have guests on and I'm like, well, I'm interested, and then I don't really have any idea it's going to connect, and then it connects, right?
Yeah.
I wonder if your attachment to the content brings people along, right? Like, well, he's into these guys. I didn't even know guys surfed 90 foot
Isn't
wave.
the most memorable? So when you get into an episode by whoever, and you're like, I accidentally, it started auto playing, and all of a sudden I got sucked into this conversation. Those episodes become more memorable than some of the ones you're like really hoping that. What would be one like? Martin Short was on Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, and it's like I didn't really learn anything new, but I enjoyed it. It was funny. But then you'll have somebody on that you don't know very well. Or Maron's another one. Maron's one where, I don't know who that, Rogan's another one.
Sure.
Like, I don't know who this person is, but you end up listening and then you're just blown away. So hopefully, you do our content. You're leading your audience to a watering hole of some kind and they enjoy it. And other times, I don't know, but I think it can only start with the authenticity of what I feel interesting. I'm not going to necessarily take a deep dive on the nuances of coffee with a barista because I don't honestly care. I enjoy coffee. I don't want to have an hour-long conversation about coffee. I don't. But I respect what they do.
Sure.
But I'm not going to, So I don't know where that ends up. So, if money weren't an object, I would think deeper about regional sort of cultural stories. I'm very interested in that. I'm really concerned with the myopia that Americans view the world and how narrow the value of outside cultures takes in our own society. It's dismissed and doesn't seem relevant. And
which is funny because it makes you think of, at least me, it makes me immediately miss Anthony Bourdain.
Yes.
Right?
Well, here's a template. Now that you bring it up, like who wouldn't want that job? Eat and have conversation.
Yeah, but I mean, I again, much like Terry Gross, I think I know you're not boiling it down to the simple sugar version of what he does. I think a lot of people look at that and go, I could do that. No, you couldn't
can't do that.
No, you could not do that.
No, and I say that saying it's an enormous challenge for me even to think about going to other places or other countries, and talk about other things. But there's plenty of stories in my backyard. That's the other thing is, every time I get a little too big for my britches and I think I should be working in other parts of the country more often and all that stuff, that is always the wrong move for me. It's the wrong attitude. If I tend my own garden first, the harvest is so much more authentic and easier and who I am and where I'm from. And so that's where I struggle with that. Going back 10 minutes is it running about to places and locations, or is it just my backyard and let's tend my garden and make it beautiful here? And I have the opportunity to both, which is really exciting.
And I think that's a sweet spot.
Yeah.
So, okay, if people don't know how to find the podcast, how do they find you?
FullExposurePodcast.com. So that's the online. What's nice about the website is it has everything on one page. So every guest has their dedicated episode page. You can just open a web browser and stream the full audio there, or on your phone, doesn't matter. You can see the video excerpts of everything we put up from the conversation and the portraits I make. And I write a little blurb about it. So literally on one page, you can see everything you need to see about that episode. We're also on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher and Google Play and Spotify if you want just the audio version. But it's fullexposurepodcast.com or just Full Exposure Podcast on those platforms. Facebook, too, Full Exposure Podcast.
Thanks, friend.
Thank you, buddy. It's glad to kick off the year with you.
Have a wonderful 2020.
We'll do that together, you and me.
Yes, we will. Thanks for ruining the ending. You're my favorite.
That's what I do.